What you'll need for this project is yarn, scissors, a needle threader, and plastic canvas to make a plastic canvas base, and 10 strips. So you start out with a sheet of plastic canvas, this one measuring 12 by 18 inches, and you can get plastic canvas at many craft stores. And out of this you're going to make a base and 10 strips that will make up your 5 rows of domino racks. Each rack is roughly about 5 inches by 10 inches, but I found it much more concise if I counted the squares, and each rack is 67 squares by 37 squares. And by counting off the squares, I get a much more accurate measurement. From a previous cut, I'm going to use that base as my template, and with the extra space at the top, I can use that to cut my strips. Each strip is 67 squares long by 5 squares wide. One of the challenges I ran into is in cutting the plastic canvas, and I found that using either a razor knife or a pair of scissors just didn't cut it, pun intended. This worked pretty good for me. Taking a razor, I have a small vise that I have in my workshop. I put it in the vise at a slight angle, and then with the plastic canvas, I'm going to take off the top portion first, and that's the portion I'm going to use for my strips eventually. So I look at my mark, and take the label off, and I just kind of pull it, get it started, maybe the first 2 little nubs you'll go through, and then you're going to cut along that line, and you get it started, first couple of nubs, and as you're pulling it along that line, it comes off pretty smooth. Now I have an extra sheet for the strips, and I've got the width of my base. Now I'm going to cut along the 37 square mark. Again, if you just get through the first couple of nubs and start pulling, it goes along pretty smoothly. And now I have my base. Now from that long strip that I cut off previously, I'm going to make my strips. With this, I'm going to count 5 squares. Each one is 5 squares by 67 squares. Now with this particular strip, I ended up getting basically 2 strips out of it. As you see, there's some leftover nubs, and those have to be taken off. So you get them started, and once they get started, you slightly angle your strip a little bit, and they come right off of there pretty easily, but just be careful because you are dealing with a razor blade here. So now I'm going to cut another 5 squares over and finish off this strip. Now at this point, you're going to grab your extra plastic canvas sheet that you've already cut 37 squares wide, and you're going to do 8 more plastic strips to give you a total of 10. So now you have your yarn, pair of scissors, a needle threader, and 10 of your plastic strips and the base. And we're going to start stitching our first row. Now you want to have about 3.5 feet of yarn for each strip that you're going to stitch. Now on your first stitch, I found by going from the top, bringing the thread through, and then leaving about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of end of your thread that you're going to stitch around, and then all the way down those 67 squares. Now getting down to your last stitch, you'll notice in this next picture, but this is the pattern of rows you're going to have. And each row consists of 3 open squares and then 1 open square. Now when you get to the end, you want to draw your end of your thread through some of the previous stitching to pull that off, and you've got a nice tight end that's not going to unravel. And then pull it through with a pair of pliers and pull it nice and snug. Now I've got my first 2 strips, and I just need to stitch the top of that pyramid. And again, you go through the same method, leaving at the end of the yarn about an inch, inch and a half, 2 inches, or whatever that you're going to stitch around. Sometimes you'll find that the two strips don't match up exactly for whatever reason. They don't, and sometimes you can pull them into place so that as you're stitching, you're not putting your needle at an angle, it's going through pretty straight. You can see here I had to angle it quite a bit. I found out later that when they didn't align up, if I just kind of pulled them along, pulled them into place, they lined up much better. Now I'm going to start my second row, and I'm going to have one blank square in between the rows. Sometimes the threads are so tight that I had a little piece of masonite I had on my desk just to kind of push the end of the needle through so I could get a good grip with it with the pliers. And then just grab one more strip, and I'm going to count 5 blank squares over for the other side of this row. And then, of course, I'm stitching the top of the third row. And now finishing up the last row. But now I have to stitch both ends, and that also takes a length of about 3.5 foot of yarn. And what I found works best is just to stitch the base first and then come back and do the ridges. And you will go over some previous thread, but that's okay. You can use any color of yarn that you like. This particular staining yarn was what they call Farmer's Market, and it was multicolored, and I thought that was pretty. And now have fun playing a great game of Mexican train dominoes. Thanks for watching, folks. Please leave a like, comment if you like this video, and if you have any questions, please put them in the comments below and I'll be sure to answer them. And thank you for watching.